I think we're ready, Mr. Chairman. We're on.
All right. So, bring the meeting to order.
Okay.
Okay, Representative Brown,
Present.
Representative Campbell,
Present.
Representative Lean,
Here.
Representative Lucas,
Present.
Representative Riggins excused, Representative Storer,
Here.
Representative Stivard,
Present.
Representative Worf,
Here.
and Chairman Locke.
Present.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Coming. We're going to be hearing two bills today. This is House Revenue, and we're going to be hearing two bills today, and I'll turn it over to my vice chair in just a moment. But House Bill 328, Residential Real Property Taxable Value, and House Bill 130, Homeowner Tax Exemption Amendments. And with that, I will turn it over to my vice chair.
We're adjourned. Darn. First bill we're gonna hear today is House Bill 328, Residential Real Property Taxability Values -2. Let's stay on point today. No stories, just on the bill, and let's keep going. All right? So Representative Locke, please present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. So this is a pretty simple bill, as all this really is this is really just an attempt or an implementation really of the Amendment A that was passed in this last election. As you all know, Amendment A went through, and this just is a shot at that implementation. If you will move over to page 2. You'll see where we begin implementing this, and it just implements that fourth class that was voted on to implement residential real property, including owner-occupied primary residence. And in this particular case, as you guys know, when this was grouped with all other, it was at 9.5%. In this bill, we lower that to 8 3/10%. And let me explain that a little bit. It had to be within a certain range of industrial per the Constitution and other statutes. It had to be within, I think it was 4 points or 40%. And that 8.3% is as low as it could be taken with that industrial being at 11.5%. So that's how it gets to that number. And as you scroll down, you'll go down to line 17. Now we get into owner-occupied primary residence means residential property where the owner of the property resides for not less than 6 months of the applicable tax year. The time frame of this has gone back and forth. Is it 6 months? Is it 8 months? But 6 months is what we chose here. Residential real property means real property improved by a dwelling designed to house not more than 4 families, including associated residential land up to 35 acres. These are just some numbers and things that were chosen to in the implementation of this. And then finally, you go down to section on page 3, line 9, 39, 13, 103 in the imposition section, and you scroll down to lines 17 through 19, that's added in there, that fourth category again, residential real property, including owner-occupied primary residence. And again, it shows that 8 3/10%. And really, that is the bill. We get to the fiscal note that if implemented with this, you can get a good feel for how much this would be an impact to the different tax values on that back page, you can see that there will be basically a reduction in revenues in the ballpark of about, what is that? Maybe about 80 some $80,000 a year, roughly, little over that. Looks like 83 million, sorry, thousand, not thousand. 83 million a year roughly is what is estimated. I'm sorry, my math brain is completely fried, so we're not getting there right now, and can't read numbers either. But anyway, that's really the bill. It's just an attempt to a plan to implement Amendment A, and this gives you a little feel for what Amendment A implemented does on the fiscal side. So I stand for questions.
Questions, committee? Representative Lean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Locke. My question comes for the municipalities. Do you anticipate that the implementation of this may cause for an increase in spec tax request?
Representative Locke?
Mr. Chairman, you know, do I expect that to happen? It very well could. There's no doubt that it could, but what is my expectation? I really don't have any. I think that's one of those things that, you know, this is a tool that has been provided to us by the people. They voted for Amendment A, and it gave us an opportunity to make an adjustment to that number from 9.5 to 8.3%. And the question is now, how does that impact the locals? And then in turn, what do the locals then do they choose to replace that revenue with via other means, or what do they expect to do? So I honestly couldn't guess what the next steps would be.
Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Chairman Locke, I'm curious if you had any conversations with them about what options they have for replacing those revenues.
Representative Locke?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Storr, no, I have not had that conversation with the locals.
Follow up, Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Chairman Locke, as we know, Amendment A did two things. It broke out residential real property into its own class and then created a subclass for owner-occupied primary residences that we have yet to define, though there are some bills floating around that do that, and you have provided a definition here. But this bill actually reduces essentially the full class as well as the subclass to the same number of 8.3%. Would you be open to the idea that we only reduce the owner-occupied primary residence? Or why did you choose to do both, I guess?
Representative Locke?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, that was a great question, and I went back and forth on what was the best way to approach that, to attempt to do the 8.5% or 8.3% against owner-occupied only versus the entire class. I chose that 8.3 against the whole class, but I think that's a policy decision by the body overall. I think if this makes it to the floor, I think that's a good conversation for the body.
Let's bring the department up. No more questions. Please state your name and who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Giel, I'm with the Department of Revenue, the Property Tax Division. The good representative walked through the bill very well and explained it very well. So I won't belabor the bill at all on that. In Wyoming, we are a tier taxation state. Minerals are at one tier. We have industrial at another tier. Before November, we had all other at a tier, but after November, now we have a residential tier. We also have a subcategory of owner-occupied that the legislature can prescribe an assessment level for, and then we now have the all other. which will be commercial, personal property, residential, personal property, and properties like that. We're also a fractional assessment state. So we're not, when we pay taxes on our property, we only pay a percentage of the full value. So fractional would mean you have fair market value times currently 9.5%. So you're paying taxes on 9.5%. So really, it's not an exemption, but really we're exempting 90% of the value that we're paying on when we're paying at 9.5%. So with the 4 tiers, and to get to Representative Stoer's question about the owner occupied, if I could, Mr. Chairman, the owner occupied is going to need an application. So they will have to come in and apply and say, yes, I do reside here. I occupy this residence. Looking at the census numbers and numbers from the EAD, that would be 175,000 applications statewide. Pretty much impossible to do in 2025. Assessors have to send their assessment notices by the 4th Monday in April. By the time, this, if it were to pass through legislation, we're looking at March. So in a month, assessors would have to accumulate 175,000 approximately applications to be an owner-occupied different subcategory. So lumping them together at the 8.3 with the owner-occupied and residential real property is probably the right thing to do for 2025, and then possibly look at an owner-occupied at a future date. Mr. Chairman, I do have an amendment that I would like to offer to this bill to kind of clean it up a little bit. And I'll go through the amendment if that's okay, Mr. Chairman, then I'll explain why.
And do you have a copy so we know what it looks like?
I-
Sure we
I-
get it right if we accept it.
I do have a copy. I have a copy from another bill that's on the opposite house.
Okay.
And it won't match the line numbers that is in your current bill. So, but I'll make sure I get it to LSO so they can amend it if you so choose. So on taking you to page 3, on line 1, delete the word 4 and the number 4 and change that to 3 and the number 3. And the reason for that amendment there is that will conform with what the State Board of Equalization considers residential real property. Anything that's under 4 family and less is residential. If it's 4 family and more, it's commercial. So that would fit in with the State Board's definitions right now. Then on page 3, line 2, delete up to 35 acres. Just that whole phrase there. So it would read associated residential land where the dwelling is located. So delete up to 35 acres. Then on page 3, line 5, delete the comma after home and insert the word or. And after the word unit on line 5, delete that comma and then and put a semicolon there, and then delete on line 6, mobile home or trailer. And to explain that, Mr. Chairman, mobile homes and trailers are personal property in Wyoming. So, and the Amendment A specifically said residential real property. So mobile homes are sold, bought and sold with a title, much like your vehicle. So if you own a mobile home and you go to sell it, you have a title for it, you sign the back of the title, it transfers at the clerk's office. So that is personal property. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I would stand for any questions on the amendment or anything else.
Committee? Representative Stoer?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Gill, would you just read the sentence that starts on page 3, line 4 as amended, just so we make sure we understand that?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, the dwelling may be any type of residence, including a single-family home or an individual condominium unit, if the dwelling is used as a primary residence.
Representative Brown, and then Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, Amendment A allows the legislature to separate commercial and residential property. Does not require them to do it, does it?
Mr. Chairman, it requires them to create the separate class of residential real property, and before it was combined with commercial. So it does require that they have a separate fourth class. Now, it doesn't mean it has to have a different level of assessment. It could be at 9.5%, but yes, it does create that fourth class, and then a subcategory.
Representative Lane, and then Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you for coming today. My question is about the deletion of the 35 acres. What does this look like for our agricultural folks if we take that out?
Mr. Chairman, great question. So agricultural land is valued at its ability to produce an agricultural product. So it's not residential real property. So that would not receive this new level of assessment. So the agricultural land will still be currently, if this were to pass, the agricultural land will be at 9.5%.
Follow-up, Representative Lane.
Thank you for that clarity. On, say, a family ranch where they've got 500 acres, there is a residence that sits there. How much property then sits with that residence?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question too. So when you look at an assessment schedule, the assessor takes the land that is only used for residential and divides that out of the total acreage. So it might be an acre, it might be 2 acres, could be 3, whatever is being used is the residential piece, and then the rest of it being ag land. So currently, everything is at 9.5%, but that assessment schedule for an ag producing property that has a house, it will be at different levels of assessment. The house will be at 8.3, the associated land will be at 8.3, the agricultural land will be at 9.5.
Follow-up, Representative Lucas, or not Lucas, Lane? All right, Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little picky here, but on page 3, line 5, changing that, is it a comma into a semicolon? I think actually a comma is probably better off there because what follows is not a whole sentence.
Mr. Chairman, I'll leave that up to the legal experts that can do those.
Thank you.
Representative Wharf.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you explain for me once again, I was trying to track all your changes, but what was the justification that you wanted to pull out the up to 35 acres?
Mr. Chairman, associated land is a lot easier to deal with than, like, let's say, the 36-acre parcel. So then the assessor is going to need to exempt or change the level of assessment for the 35, and then the other acre will be at 9.5 or a different level of assessment. So hard to deal with that extra acre. What if it's 35.01 and still value that extra land, if you will, uniformly?
Follow-up?
If I may, the way you described it to me almost sounds a little bit arbitrary and capricious on how they assess those lands, because it sounds like to me, you know, one individual may look at, I guess, give more latitude as far as what they're calling occupied or used acreage, whereas another assessor may look at it totally different. And I guess, I mean, one of the things we keep getting told is we got to have it to where it's uniform throughout. And that sounds like to me that we're leaving an awful lot of interpretation up to the assessors, individual assessors. And you may even have an assessor in a county that assesses properties different how does the department handle that? How do you try to get uniformity when you give so much latitude to the assessors on that assessment?
Mr. Gill?
Mr. Chairman, well, first of all, the department provides education to all county assessors and their staff. And of course, a lot of that education is appraisal uniformity. Back to the 35 acres, it's where the dwelling is located. So it says associated residential land where the dwelling is located. So it has to have a dwelling. So that's why I think getting rid of that marker of 35 is probably a better thing to do.
No more questions? I'll ask it later. Who else in the audience wants to speak? Hold on, I've got public. I want to bring the two ladies that are online. Let's bring both of them on real quick and get through them.
I'm admitting Dixie Huxtable and Kelly Carpenter.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am?
Okay, thank you for allowing me to testify remotely. My name is Dixie Huxtable. I am the Converse County Assessor, and I would be willing to offer some comments about some of those questions that were just raised. First and foremost, we do support the comments from the Department of Revenue as far as their changes are concerned. In regards to the assessment ratio, if you were to split out the owner occupied into a different assessment ratio, that would be impossible for us to do for 25. As they stated, we would have to get an application form in order to determine that. So for 25, leaving them the same assessment ratio certainly makes sense for uniformity. Moving on to page 3, the amendments that they were making, changing the 4-family structure to a 3-family makes sense based on how the State Board of Equalization has our abstract coded now. It would just clear that up and make it consistent. We encourage the change of language from 35 to just associated land. We have multiple parcels that has a residence on it that may be a 40-acre parcel or a 60-acre parcel. And it's all one legal description, but it's more than 35 acres. And the concern for us was how would we value and split that assessment ratio up, with some of them being considered residential and some being not based on this language. So going back to the associated land certainly makes sense and is more uniform for us to administer across the state. And then, of course, the personal property issue with the mobile home and trailer is a concern for us. And to the agricultural question, there are rules that the Department of Revenue have promulgated that give us direction that a home site on an agricultural parcel shall consist of 1 acre per habitable structure, unless there's verifiable information otherwise. So we already have the rules in place for that. So in most typical agricultural parcels, that 35 acres is not an issue. The residential land under that house would still qualify for this different class. So I hope that helps explain some of the questions that may have been asked, but I stand for any other questions that someone might have. Thank you, sir.
Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Ms. Huxtable, for being here. Just for clarification for the committee, could you help us understand, Mr. Gill could probably also answer this question, what is included when we go to 3 families versus 4, and what kind of units are part of that residential real property definition in terms of thinking about condominiums or townhomes or things that may be individually owned, but where that definition breaks down in terms of what's in real residential and what's in the all other class still?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, certainly. So the individual condominium unit that is sold separately is defined in this bill already. So that would still be a residential property. The difference comes into a single-family residential, and then you may have a duplex where there are 2 units, but they're owned separately. The true meaning of the duplex depends on how it's coded in our abstract. So I have several in my county where there's a duplex and the same owner owns both sides. Obviously cannot live in both sides. So one side is owner occupied and one side is not, but they're still considered residential units. We also have the ability where there may be a duplex that's split down the middle, and the jurisdiction allows them to be sold separately. And certainly those would be individual single-family residents. But in our system, they could be coded exactly the same. Also, there is a triplex. We don't have a lot of those where there are 3 units in one building owned by one person. And our system, based on the State Board of Equalization's abstract that they provide to us to use, has up to a 3-unit family considered residential. Once you get to a 4-unit, which would be like a quad, a structure that houses 4 or more, becomes an apartment or a commercial classification. And certainly that could change over time, but for now, what our system can handle is 3 or less. And so hopefully that answers your question. If you have any additional, I stand for those questions.
I'm a little. Representative Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but I have to ask, in these apartment buildings, it's the tenants that really pay that property tax. The owner doesn't pay that. That gets rolled into the rent. So we have people, maybe single family or single parent mothers or fathers, who can't afford to own their own property, and yet their property tax is getting raised because it's treated like a commercial property rather than a residential property. I see this as a real burden on poor people because they are the ones paying the property taxes. Don't you agree with that?
Ms. Escobar?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, so I think we need to be clear on what we're talking about. If it is a structure that houses multiple families, the bill goes to the owner of the structure, with the exception of a condominium unit where the airspace to speak of is sold separately. Those are handled differently, and the condominium unit is billed to the individual. But if you have a structure that houses 4 people, the tax bill goes to the owner of the property, not to the individual people renting inside. I hope that clarifies what you were talking about.
That's good. Follow up, Representative Brown, make it quick. We need to keep moving.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, ma'am, but again, the bill goes to the property owner, but we all know that property tax gets rolled into that rent. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, certainly that can happen. I'm not aware of how the owners deal with that. Certainly I could understand that the property taxes could get rolled into the rent. My point is that for us to administer this, currently, those 4plexes and larger are considered a different class than residential. And for us to manage this for 2025 would take a complete change in the system. I guess that was my change. If you wanted to make it a policy that those are included, certainly that could happen, but it's going to take a change in our system as we currently know it now.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. Yes. Kelly Carpenter available?
Ms. Carpenter's on, Mr.
Go
Chairman.
ahead, Ms. Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, sir. Kelly Carpenter with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Appreciate the opportunity to join you virtually today from Laramie. Just wanted to share that the Wyoming Farm Bureau sits in opposition to this bill, much in the same way that we vocally opposed the Constitutional Amendment A that passed in 2024. Our reasons stem from longstanding policy developed by our members that opposes splitting residential property from agricultural and commercial property. We believe it complicates the tax system, increases the workload for our county assessors, and may be the start of shifting the tax burden from one type of property to another. We understand that this bill is an attempt at implementing the constitutional amendment. Please be assured, but we hope you understand that our opposition really lies in the unintended consequences, as I just mentioned. Anyway, I'll keep it brief and take any questions you or the committee may have. Thank you.
Any questions, committee? Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you for joining us today. Through the Federation, could you tell me what would be something that you would support with Amendment A, seeing as it passed? Have you guys had that conversation?
Ms. Carpenter?
Mr. Vice Chair, Representative Lean, thank you. Great question. As there are absolutely a lot of remedies and things going on regarding property tax this session. And no question, the folks of Wyoming spoke on that amendment. But we believe it can be remedied potentially by the next bill that the committee will consider. We just really have a lot of heartburn with splitting it out, regarding shifting the tax burden and whatnot. But that's kind of where our beliefs lie. I'm sorry if that's not very descriptive, but that's kind of our direction.
Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Ms. Carpenter, to be here. Help me understand, when your concern is about shifting the tax burden, are you concerned about shifting the tax burden to the agricultural residences? I'm just trying to understand that.
Ms. Carpenter?
Absolutely. Mr. Vice Chair, Representative Storr, great question, and thank you for that question. Absolutely, and even beyond shifting from to the agricultural property aspect, I think the complication, the tax tiers, or increasing the number of tax tiers, excuse me. We've heard from other states, it makes it a lot more complicated, as well as, we're concerned about it shifting beyond agriculture to other industries as well. We visited with other industry groups that could see the potential in shifting to, commercial or other areas that are taxed. So we're, sorry, long way of getting there. We're concerned about shifting to agricultural, but as well as beyond agricultural properties too.
Follow up?
If I may. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I guess I think it's worth noting that agricultural property is taxed at a production value, and as a result is quite low compared to any other property. And in most cases, if you are looking at a residential home within an agricultural property, that too is most likely, or at least the ones we would be concerned about, would be the owner occupied, and those are the ones that we would probably try to keep at the lower rate. But we certainly have a lot of large agricultural properties owned in the state that may be second homes in many cases, and have a very low tax burden as well. Just an observation.
No more questions, committee? Let's go ahead and move to the public. Open it up for public comment.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I support the bill. In a floor debate I listened to the other day, I heard a member make the remark that he was talking about those families that when they open their tax bill, their property tax bill, they have to then go sit down and redo their budget, their family budget. And so I'd ask the committee not to lose sight of the fact that what you're really talking about here is fixed income families. Perhaps this touches a little bit to Representative Brown's question a few minutes ago, because we have them around the state. And as I knocked on doors last summer, I heard from some of them. And that's a common refrain. And, you know, is this enough? Are we going to hear other tax issues brought up? Probably, but this is a start. I would probably make similar comments on House Bill 130. So I'll restrain myself and thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman, subject to your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Is there anybody else in the audience who wants to speak? Please come forward, sit down, and state your names and who you're representing, please.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair. Seems like we were just here. My name is Bob McLaurin. I'm with WHAM. I'm here with Mayor Matt Murdock. He's going to speak for our organization on this issue. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. It is good to see some of you again. Thank you. My name is Matt Murdock. I am the mayor of town of Pinedale. Currently, WHAM has this bill under a monitor position. As you know, we recognize that a lot of homeowners and citizens within the state, as has been mentioned, are speaking out that they feel the taxes are extremely high. And I think Mr. Winnie and others have noted that. And so we definitely recognize that fact. But at the same time, we ask that whatever solution we come to would be a constitutional solution. So this bill is actually probably one of the more constitutional solutions we've seen out there. We are monitoring it, but I think it's important to note that there is no backfill, that this could mean significant cuts in our revenue. I think Representative Lean had made the comment, is there going to be an increase in sped taxes? Likely there will be a search for that because some of these services, fire engines, roads, the town of Pinedale, for example, uses this revenue to match YDOT grants. When we make applications to the FAA or when we make applications to any of our projects, this is where our match money comes from. When SLIB comes to us and says, how much are you going to put in? These are where our funds come from. And so we need to be certain that everybody recognizes that as we are trying to relieve the tax burden upon our citizens, which as best we can, we ought to. At the same time, there are a number of services that these citizens do take advantage of and do expect to be there. And the question is which of those services do we begin cutting? And as soon as we begin cutting that, or not plowing streets or not getting streets done or the maintenance done as fast as we'd like, that has a cost. I can tell you right now in the town of Pinedale, 8-9 years ago, we implemented a plan to chip seal 1/6 of our town every year. And we do that in partnership with the Sublette County Commissioners and joining together and putting contracts and putting them out to bid together. We are now down to probably 1/8 or 1/9 of our town, just because costs rise and our amount of ability to match and contribute to that. So those costs, though, are not as apparent. Citizens note when there are potholes. Citizens note when sidewalks start to break. And that makes your town look bad, and that gives and contributes to lesser confidence in the management of your town. So we have to balance these. So we are monitoring this bill. We ask that, that this is a better way to attack it than through rates. Possibly maybe carving out homeowners is something that definitely needs to be considered versus second homeowners. And maybe you want to delay the implementation of this bill until you can do that. But those are my comments. And if you have any questions, I stand to answer as I can.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none? Excuse me, Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Murdock, for being here. I agree with your comments about maybe delaying the implementation of this. You know, one of the challenges we have with trying to implement Amendment A is we don't have, we have guesses or estimates for the number of owner-occupied homes. But even in Teton County, we don't have a good figure. So I have done some calcs based on census data and probably data that the Department of Revenue provided as well. I came up with around 62% for Sublette County would be owner occupied. I'm just wondering whether you have any sense of what that might be in your community.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Representative Storr, your numbers are not far from wrong. Currently, the town of Pinedale has about 1,200 water meters within the community. That's our best way that we can measure how many homes are. And of those, there is a significant portion, 20 to 30%, that are probably second homes owned by somebody elsewhere. And that number, it just varies. And if you move a little bit outside of Pinedale itself, into the surrounding area, we have a much larger number. Then we also have the issue of the number of people who are using their homes for second homes, correct? Or, second homes. Or we have a number of people who are using their homes, for example, for Airbnb and short-term rentals who may not be there. We had a big challenge in COVID where people were coming in, buying up our affordable housing and flipping them into short-term rentals, not really living there, but then, reducing our inventory, et cetera. So that became a complication. We did regulate that, but there are a number of people who are not there but own a home. Thank you.
Any more questions? We'll go ahead and close out. Oh, he said he didn't. All right, what's your pleasure with the bill, committee? Moved by Representative Lane, seconded by Representative Vore. So let's look, any comments, questions, amendments?
Mr. Vice Chair?
Representative Storr?
I would like to propose kind of a conceptual amendment and just float this with the committee and see if there's interest and try to explain my thoughts on this. So if that's all right.
Go ahead, Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So we have a lot of different property tax bills floating around out there, and there's a lot of anxiety, to be honest, within our cities, counties, school districts, and special districts who are dependent on these revenues, as Mr. Murdock testified today. And we're just still getting our arms wrapped around what the impact of that is. I was just visiting with Department of Revenue about the fiscal note on SF 69 as currently written that is being heard at House Appropriations as we speak. The fiscal note on that for the next 2 years is $254 million a year. That is a significant hit for both local governments and schools. And much of that is coming from, again, 35% of the residential assessed value in the state comes from Teton County. So, and I would argue that, let's see, what was my number for Teton? Our owner-occupied estimate is probably less than Sublette County, probably more in the 40 to 50%. Perhaps. Again, a little hard to get a good estimate on those numbers. So for all those reasons, and to help people from freaking out quite as much, I would conceptually propose a conceptual amendment. I know it can be written because I've drafted something close to this, but that would delay the implementation of this bill for 2 years. So it would apply to the tax year 2027. I think we could still keep the effective immediately in there so that the department could try to figure out how many owner-occupied homes we really do have in the state and start an application process. Certainly the idea behind Amendment A was essentially to give us a tool not only to pull out residential real estate property separately, but also to pull out owner-occupied, recognizing that we have more and more second homes in that category. And, it's a policy question whether we're trying to reduce their property tax as well, or whether we really care about owner-occupied. That's who we're, that's, the discussion has been that that's who we're most concerned about. That's who we are trying to give property tax relief to. So one would be to delay the bill, to allow, and to create an application process and to vary the rate of assessment. And so we would pull out owner-occupied separately. We would take that to 8.3%. And I would argue that, frankly, for the real property category, we would try to make this so it's net, that it's net neutral in terms of property tax. Now, how that's going to impact each county is going to vary, but I did do some number crunching over the last month or so. And if we were to take residential real property up to 10.5%, increasing second homes, that does increase rental properties as well. That part's a bit of a concern. But if we were just to nudge that up to 10.5 or 11, I think was the number, and I'll go with 10.5 being on the low side, that would make this more of a net zero revenue across the state. So that's the concept. Does everybody understand it?
Any questions, committee?
I guess I need to ask if there's a second or not. If
Was
not-
there a second on that? Excuse me. No second. So
I know.
let's work the bill then. Any amendments on page 1? Any amendments on page 2?
Mr. Co-Chair.
Representative Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Could I ask the department to have a paper copy of that amendment? Is that possible?
Mr. Gill? Thank you, sir. Representative Lane?
Mr. Co-Chair, I would move that we adopt the amendment provided by the department for page 3, line 1, delete 4 and insert 3. Page 3, line 2, delete 35 acres. Page 3, line 5, delete the comma and insert an or. And then page 3, line 6, delete the mobile home or a trailer.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. The department's amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Amendment passes.
Oh, Gary was. Okay.
All right, Gary was a no. Page 4.
Thank you, Mr.
Store.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Again, we've got SF 69. We have HB 169 that we passed out of the House. It's going over to the Senate. It's similar. Probably those will get combined in some way or one drop. But then we also have the acquisition value bill that, as you know, we've discussed on the floor. I think it'll be on third reading today. I expect that to pass out. So there's just a lot of moving parts currently, and it's really hard for our communities to understand what the impacts to their revenues would be as a result of all these different bills. So I would still argue that implementation of this change should be delayed until 2027. So the amendment would be just to change the year on page 4, line 2, from 2025 to 2027.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Representative Lean?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I would just argue that the people didn't ask us to wait to implement Amendment A, that they wanted us to be able to work it this session and get it implemented. I understand that the departments have a lot of moving pieces going through right now. I kind of feel like we have spaghetti on the wall and we're just waiting to see what sticks. As we're getting ready for crossover, I anticipate that there will be thoughtful intention put into what passes in both chambers. And so I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Representative Wharf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too, excuse me, I too am going to resist for the main reasons that that Representative Lynn mentioned. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't, I didn't want people to feel like we didn't listen to the testimony that was received. But I think that is why I would vote against this amendment, is I do think the people already told us what they would like. And so for that reason, I'm going to resist the amendment.
Representative Storrs' motion to change 2025 to 2027, say aye.
Aye.
All
Somebody call the question.
Question being called. Ma'am, can you take roll?
This is a roll call vote on House Bill 328, Residential Real Property Taxable Value 2, as amended. Representative Brown?
Aye.
Representative Campbell?
Aye.
Representative Lean?
Aye.
Representative Lucas?
Aye.
Representative Riggins excused. Representative Storer?
No.
Representative Stivar?
Aye.
Representative Wharf?
Aye.
Chairman Locke?
Aye.
We have 7 aye, 1 no, and 1 excused, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Donna. Now, let's move on to our next bill, House Bill 130. Representative Heiner. And I'm going to turn it back over to the chairman. I don't need any more of this headache.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members.
Majority Floor Leader, please proceed.
I bring probably the first property tax bill you've heard this session. So I can go really slow because this is the first time we've heard a property tax bill, right? I think this is more than just having another horse in the race. We're putting a bunch of arrows in the quiver here. And as we start going to the archery range, we're going to see which arrow hits closest to the mark. But, you know, to do that, you want more than just 2 or 3 arrows. So this brings another idea to the committee. And I know it's difficult with all these different ideas. Some of them are similar, some of them are kind of radical. But that's part of the act of legislation, is finding the best fit that will be a win-win for all those involved. So as I go through this, I'll try to point out those things that are different from other tax bills, property tax relief bills you've heard in the past. So this one has, it's for 2 years and it's effective immediately. So it's for tax year 2025, the one we're in, and 2026. It's a 2-year with a sunset. So that's similar to some of the others you've seen. And this bill on page 2 is a 50% exemption on your primary residence, and I'll talk about primary residence, but it's got a ceiling of $200,000. What I wanted to do is have a relief, but something that's not going to break the bank. Something that we can deal with over these 2 years, but it's not going to be $250 million a year like some of these other bills you've seen. So this bill, actually, it costs about $85 million a year. And I'll talk about the pay for a little bit later, but why did I come up with $200,000? I looked at some of the other states in the union that have property tax relief. A lot of them just have a flat amount. Some have $25,000, $30,000 they just take off right off the top of the assessed value. Idaho takes $100,000 off of everybody. And I like that, but I wanted some skin in the game from everyone. So if you have a mobile home or a trailer, I wanted them to pay a little bit of property tax and not be totally exempt, because they do receive some benefits. So that's why I came up. I still feel like 50%. It kind of follows the ballot initiative that our citizens wanted, was 50%. But by putting the ceiling at $200,000, it lowers the overall cost to the state and to our communities. Now, $200,000, this is without land. The average home price in Wyoming, if you take out, the upper echelon, the multi-million-dollar homes, the average home price is about $250,000 with land. So you take the land component out, and this will provide relief to most taxpayers in Wyoming. So it's kind of hitting those, it's helping those taxpayers that need the help right now. Those widows that are living on fixed incomes, those that don't have their wherewithal to be able to pay a high tax, property tax bill. So going on page 2, primary residence means a single-family property, residential property, where they actually reside for not less than 8 months out of the year. Here I'm concerned if you live in another state, you can claim residency in that state if you live there 6 months. Well, if you claim 6 months in XYZ state, then you come to Wyoming and we only require 6 months here to get an exemption, you can get the both of two worlds. So 8 months is the reason for that. And then the next thing is something that you may not have seen before. I tried to protect our active duty members of the armed forces. They may not be able to reside in their home for 8 months because they're on deployment. So those are carved out here, that if they're on active duty, they still qualify, and their spouse will, or other member of their family will still qualify if they're legally domiciled in that home. Now, a single-family residential property means, on page 3, second paragraph, line 8, it means a structure. So the land is not included, and that is because we wanted to make this implemented in this year. So in order to do it quickly, we had to do that. Page 4, the appropriation, a lot of times when we read a fiscal note, we make decisions based on a fiscal note, and sometimes it doesn't turn out to be accurate for one reason or another. The long-term homeowner property exemption that we passed a couple of years ago may be more expensive than we thought. The rebate program turned out to be a lot more expensive than we anticipated. So rather than going back to the well, it's on page 4, line 6, it says if there's not enough appropriated insufficiently to fully compensate each government entity, then the funds will be distributed on a pro rata basis. So we're not going to go back to the well for more money. If we only have 80% funding, we pay 80%. And the county treasurers will keep record of what it costs their communities and their counties, submit that to the state, and the state will reimburse them. So jumping over to page 5, how do we pay for this? This is another novel idea. And it's a little complicated at this point because we're doing it through reversions and clawbacks. It's not, in order to do this, we had to claw back this money and put it into the general fund and then pay for this property tax relief out of the general fund. So what this does is it claws back money in section 321, 318, 325, and 323. These are the energy matching funds that the governor has at his disposal to further energy projects here in Wyoming. And we've heard multiple times that some of those energy projects that this money's been expended on in the past is furthering green energy agenda. Carbon capture, wind energy, direct air capture and storage. So this claws back that money. There's, at the time, before the session began, there was $182 million unappropriated, unencumbered. And so this claws that back into the general fund and then pays for this out of that money. Now, if you don't like that, section 3 can be eliminated. Just delete that. The supplemental budget bill claws back 100 million of that. So there's multiple things going on here. So if you decide to delete section 3, it will just take that money out of the general fund, out of our savings account. Page 6, this is still part of section 3. Nothing will be construed to impair existing expenditures, agreements, contracts. If they've already obligated that money, we're not trying to claw any of that back. Section 4 here is appropriation for $176 million for a 2-year program. And on page 7, it's effective immediately in order to be effective for 2025. So that's the bill. It's just another arrow in the quiver for you as we struggle to find something that's going to be a win-win for everyone. We've heard some options are to have no backfill. I know my email and my phone is getting blown up about no backfill. Do we need 100% backfill? Maybe not. Maybe 100% is the wrong number too. We all need some skin in the game. So should the state be 100% behind keeping everyone whole? Maybe not. What is that magical number? I do not know. That's what this body and the rest of the legislature should do. But in my opinion, in my humble opinion, to pass a property tax relief bill that hurts our communities, our towns, and our cities with no backfill, the state doesn't have any skin in the game at that point. So we're mandating something on our communities that is not impacting us as a state. I think we should all participate. It should be all inclusive. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to present this. I'm open for suggestions to improve it and questions to put me on this hot seat.
Thank you, Majority Leader. And questions for the Majority Floor Leader?
Representative Locke.
Representative Stivar.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, explain the active duty military thing to me, because I was active duty military, and this is not making any sense to me.
Majority Floor Leader Heiner.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, so as it says if a person claiming the exception is or a member of the person's immediate family is an active duty member of the armed forces. Now, do we need to define that? I don't know. But if for some reason the person cannot meet the 8 months requirement because they may be on deployment or maybe they're serving a couple of months somewhere, you're more familiar with this than I am, Representative Stivar. But what we're trying to do is protect those people in the military that may not be able to qualify for the 8 months.
Follow up?
Please.
Thank you, Representative Locke. When I enlisted in the United States Army, I enlisted from Mountain View, Wyoming. So I was a resident of Wyoming, even though I was gone for 10 years in Germany, other places, south of the border, Sandbox. When I got out, I was still considered a resident of Wyoming. I don't think this needs to be in here.
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Heiner.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, because we use this 8-month actually resides in the home, so that somebody with a second home can't get the benefit of this tax exemption. We had to put some sideboards there. And so to protect the military that is not actually residing in the home because they are serving somewhere else, they still will be a resident. But this criteria of residing in the home, we had to protect them and make it so that the second person that owns multiple homes could not claim this exemption. It may be actually only residing a few months in their home.
Other question, follow-up, or other questions?
Well, I need to think about this. It's just, I can't wrap my brain around this one right quick. I'm sorry.
It's the 8-month thing. Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the Vice Chair's concerns, I actually do think this makes sense. It may not be necessary, perhaps, but I think it's a thoughtful addition to these bills that we've been discussing along these lines. And I also appreciate the 8-month versus 6-month decision there. I am concerned that there are a lot of people that tell other places where they have homes that they live in Wyoming for 6 months of the year. In fact, it's a bit of a joke in my community. When I'm out at a social event, I often ask people how much time they spend in Teton County, and that always seems to be the answer, even though it's not. So I do think going to 8 months makes a lot of sense. I guess, so my question, though, is still similar to some of our other bills. As you know, it's the Teton County community and Lincoln County community have seen the highest increases and have the highest values. And so a $200,000 exemption, even for my middle-class families that now own $2 million homes, even though they look like a $200,000 home in the rest of the state, that this would not really help them very much. And I guess I just try to ask the bringer of the bill your thoughts on how to address that inequity.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, that is a quandary we're all struggling with. And I have a home in North Lincoln County, and it's not as large a home as the one I live in Southwest Wyoming, but it's worth 3 times the money. I didn't pay that, but it's appreciated in value to where my property taxes are almost 3 times the amount up there. So it will not help those situations as much as the average Wyoming citizen. And that's what I was targeting, is the average citizen. Now, will it be disproportionate? Some of those that have multi-million-dollar homes will not get much relief. But the same argument can be made that, do we provide a big tax relief for someone with several million-dollar home versus someone that's lived, some widow that's in her 80s, struggling to make ends meet with Social Security? And to me, that's what I was hoping for, is to help those individuals on fixed incomes that are struggling to, whether they're going to have ramen noodles to eat or whether they're going to have something else. So that, plus I didn't want something that was going to be a long-term burden on the state to be able to backfill. If we have to backfill $500 million a year, that's not sustainable. I don't think we can continue to do that. So where is the sweet spot? That's why we have multiple arrows in this quiver. Let's find out what works best for everybody. I am full open to suggestions. I want something that's going to be a win-win. But is it going to be ideal for everyone? I doubt it. What we want to do is try to do the best for as many as we can.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Heiner. Just as a clarification, we were up late last night, so I'm a little slow this morning. The number for unobligated funds in the energy, what do we call that again?
The energy matching funds.
The energy matching funds, thank you. What was that number?
Mr. Mr. Chairman,
Representative Heiner, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, there was, as of just the week before the session, there was 182 million, a little over $182 million.
And follow up.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, but as you said, in the supplemental budget as it currently exists, we're already clawing back 100 of that 182 million. So there would, assuming that goes through, then there would only be 82 million of that funds to backfill, to use as a backfill to our local communities. And yet the cost of this is about 176 million, 166 million, something like that. So how do we make up that difference?
Representative Heiner.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, so the difference would have to come out of our general fund, out of our savings. And you may or may not decide to even use the backfill. If the supplemental budget bill passes and 100 million is taken out of those energy matching funds, you may decide to leave the rest. We put some sideboards on it with some amendments yesterday. Maybe we don't take any backfill, but this is written in such a way, if you decide to strike Section 3, all of that clawbacks go away, and the $176 million cost for 2 years, so that's, that's 85 million a year, a little over that, that would come out of our general fund. And a lot of our property tax relief bills have money coming out of the general fund. I was just trying to minimize that amount, but if we don't use any reversions, then we'll have to get the whole amount out of there.
Representative Lucas, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Majority Floor Leader Heiner. You have mobile homes are included in this, and mobile homes are currently considered to be personal property and are taxed differently. How would you envision that part will work?
Representative Heiner.
I don't mind telling you I don't know. That is something that we will have to, I wanted to come up with a solution that would help those in single-wide mobile homes, double-wide mobile homes. If we need to add some language there, Mr. Chairman, for clarification, I seek help from the committee.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Majority Floor Leader, thank you for your candor on that. I do appreciate your comment that everybody should have some skin in the game. Appreciate that.
Any other questions for the Majority Floor Leader? Gary? Representative Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Heiner, thank you so much for bringing this bill. I like it. But I would like to ask, is the reason that you're not adding the land to this, is this because of the backfill, what it would take?
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, the reason is because of the expediting the relief for this year. And in order to make this as fast and equitable as possible, it had to be that way. And also to make $200,000 ceiling, by removing the land, it makes it cleaner.
Any other questions for the Majority Floor Leader? So let me just, I'm just going to summarize, if you don't mind, and just make sure I'm on, because, again, I think you did a very clean job of coming up with another approach. 50% fair market value, structure only, for the first $200,000, and primary residence, something you live in for 8 months. That's kind of the summary overall, right? Does that capture it, please?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that captures it.
Perfect.
Military, that's one thing, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, to add. Military, I wanted to protect the active military, and if the wording needs to be changed, I took this from another state. I plagiarized, that's how I got through college. But, yeah, I took these words from another state that they did the same thing.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One more.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Heiner. Sorry about that. Some of the other bills we've discussed, the system, if we're going to try to implement this, and there is an application process for this, that you would either, I think, need to only be able to apply to either for the long-term homeowners exemption or this exemption. And we put that language in these other bills. Is that in this bill currently?
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, no, that is not in this bill. But Representative Nicholas brought a bill that would clarify that, and so the county treasurer, the county would have to make that evident for everyone. They could only choose one, and hopefully make it so that citizens can choose which one is the best for them. And Representative Nicholas's bill addresses that.
Any other questions? I did have one question, and just to kind of get your feel for this, because this is one problem. In the first year, the one issue is likely to be, and we'll let the department clarify, but that home ownership for 8 months is potentially an issue in the first year. If we were to take this and make an adjustment to where that was in the second year, to allow us to implement it in some way, if we were to reword it that way, is that something that would be amenable to you?
Mr. Chairman, I would. It's important to me that we get this out as fast as possible. If we could tweak the language a little bit to make it so it works this year, I'm all for that. The application, I assume, will just have on the form, it'll just have an affirmation. I live in this home more than 8 months a year. That's probably, we're not going to be able to do the research, Mr. Chairman, so it's probably just a matter of an affirmation by the taxpayer that they live in the home that much time or not.
Perfect, thank you. It may have to be a second year thing, but I think the concept is a good one, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, or? All right, very good. Thank you so much, Majority Floor Leader. We appreciate that. Department, would you like to come up, please? Thank you, Mr. Gill, and you haven't seen any bills like this the whole session. So.
I haven't, Mr. Chairman. Ken Gill, I'm with the Department of Revenue Property Tax Division. I didn't write any fiscal notes this year, so we weren't busy with that. Mr. Chairman, you're correct in your statement. This will require an application, and about 175,000 of them statewide. Assessors have to have their assessment notices out by the fourth Monday in April. So we're looking from this point, 2 months that they would have to collect all those applications. So you're correct. In the first year, that would be an issue. To Representative Storr's question on the language, if you receive the long-term homeowners exemption, yes, the system would, if you receive that exemption, we cannot apply this exemption also. We can't do a net of a net. So we're piling exemptions on these structures. And Representative Nicholas's bill does help the order, and it also tells us where the next one is applied. But again, if they receive the long-term homeowners exemption, we would not be able to apply this one. So, and I think that is 3911-105A Romanet 45. So.
Any questions for the department? If not, I have a quick one. Oh, sorry. Representative Lane, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious if this could be remedied with sending an affidavit with a tax bill that they may be able to receive this exemption with all the steps labeled out, that they're here 8 months, et cetera, and then return that to the county assessor. Would that, then they could adjust the bill? Do you think that could be a viable option for this year?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, great thinking there. Unfortunately, the tax calendar starts at January 1, assessment notices go out on the fourth Monday in April. Mill levies are set on the first Monday in August. Tax bills go out in September, October. So those tax bills have already gone out for the 2024 taxes. So really no opportunity for anyone to return anything at this point in time. But great thought of how to inform the county. But they will need some type of application, and obviously something against false swearing will be on that affidavit also. So yeah, good thinking out of the box on that, but yeah, the tax calendar just wouldn't lend to that for this year.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gill. We always appreciate your information. Does the department have an electronic application capability? I'm just thinking of how to make it easier for everybody, including the applicant. Just a thought.
Mr. Chairman, we do have an electronic application for the property tax refund. I don't remember, I don't administer that program. I don't remember exactly how many people apply online. There's a considerable amount that do, but if you've ever been up in our office when they're receiving those refunds, there's boxes and boxes upon boxes of mail for the 15,000 applications that we receive for that. I will say, if it comes down to whether it be this bill or the one that we heard before where we do need an application, we have considered how maybe we can prop something up online, have everyone apply online, no paper applications whatsoever, apply online, and then be able to take those and put them into the CAMA system. That's one nice thing in Wyoming. We have a statewide CAMA system. So all of the data for the fiscal notes that we pull, that all comes from the statewide because we have access to that and we can pull those numbers. We're the envy of many states in this country because we do have a statewide CAMA system, whereas most states don't. Most counties just have their own CAMA system. So in our state, all the reports are uniform, all the assessment schedules are uniform, minus a logo for the county or something like that. But it's very fortunate in the state that the legislature continues to support our statewide CAMA system.
Any other questions? A quick question for you. I just wanted to go back to kind of the question that was brought up earlier about how these all align. It would probably be appropriate, similar to what we've done in other bills, to, and I'm asking to make sure this is correct, but it would seem to me that we would want to, let's take the long-term homeowner exemption, which is already out there. If this were to move forward, it would probably be, the proper approach would be to put something in this bill that says, if you accept the long-term homeowner, then this one would not be effective, something like that. Is that accurate? That would be a proper addition to make sure these weren't duplicated and there was no confusion with the department. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is true, and that would be 3911-105A, Romanet 45 is the long-term homeowners.
Okay, great. And so, and we might amendment, I don't know if we got the words to amend here if we decide to move forward, but that's something that we may have to add on the floor. And then this other issue, just going back, and I'm just making sure I've got a clear picture in my head. This other issue, due to this, the home ownership, we would have to address a first year and a second year implementation of that. The homeowner to where, so in the first year, we would have to word it such that it would be against all of the properties in the category that's here. And then in the second year, we could apply the home ownership component. So it'd have to be adjusted according to that.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, that is true. It would be impossible to collect those applications for the first year.
Okay.
The second year, obviously, then we can research and see how to collect those. Currently, we really don't know who occupies a home.
Sure.
You know, a lot of homes are VRBO, Airbnb, and just built for that and only used for that. And second homes, we don't really collect the information of whether they're a rental versus owner occupied. So that information just isn't available at this point in time.
Gotcha. Okay, any other questions for the department? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Appreciate that. Thanks, brother. Sorry about that. Too much stuff in my hand. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Rob Krieger. I serve as the Executive Director of the Wyoming Energy Authority. Don't have the honor of coming in front of you all very much, but just for some background for you all, we are a quasi-state entity. Think of us as essentially the state's Department of Energy. So the reason we're quasi is I answer to a board of directors. It's made up of private industries. So I have coal members, oil and gas members, utility members, as well as renewables. So I just wanted to provide you all that background on who we are as the WEA. Big thing of what we do is we, as was mentioned earlier, the energy matching funds are housed in the governor's office, but were delegated to us at the Energy Authority to implement. So I wanted to just walk through some of the things that have been done and talk about, sort of just clarify where we are. So currently, we're at 146 million remaining. I just want to clarify that for the committee. So Section 321 in prior budgets was the Energy Matching Fund program. Over the past 3 budgets, that appropriation has been 155 million. Where we are at currently is 46 million remaining in that.
46 million?
In that pot, yes, sir.
Thank you, sorry.
And then in Section 323, that's the large energy matching fund program. There was a $100 million allocation, and that is whole. That is 100 million. So that's where we get that total of 146. So I just wanted to clarify that for the committee. A couple other things, the word matching. Back when this fund was originally stood up, the intent of the legislature at the time was to have us match with federal or private projects to make sure those happen in the state of Wyoming. So there's a mandate that we have to follow that at a minimum, there has to be a 50-50 match from the project that comes in front of us. I'm proud that we have well exceeded that. So we've spent about 98 million on projects, and we've leveraged over 260 million in private or federal investment in those projects that have come to the state of Wyoming. I just want to clarify again, too, some things that have been said on the floor as well as in this committee. We have not put a cent towards direct air capture projects. There has been one in front of us. We denied it. Our take on that is those take a lot of energy. The technology is not quite there, so we have not approved those projects to date. I just walk through briefly because I know this is the Revenue Committee and not Minerals, but of the 98 million that we have invested, 75% of those projects have been fossil fuel projects. So oil and gas, coal, we've done some things with critical minerals, hydrogen, helium as well. And then we also have a project around nuclear. If you look at Section 321 from prior budgets, you will see that it is very broad on what the matching funds were intended to do. So it'll say fossil fuel projects, renewable, I think solar and wind is specifically called out in there. Carbon capture, pipelines, it's really the whole gamut of energy that is required for us to look at. So yes, we have done one renewable project. That was $5 million. And then we've done 2 carbon storage projects as well. Just some high level, I think where the allocations and these funds get a little confusing is there were some earmarks, Mr. Chairman, back in the original appropriation in 321 that really was us helping some of our coal mines up in the northeast corner of the state move roads so they could mine some more coal. So I think some of those need to be shaved off the top when we're talking about this whole fund as a whole. Those are some of the projects. I would note we're in the middle. We do a triannual review of projects. So a company essentially would send us, hey, we got this idea, we think we qualify for this program. What do you think? We make them do a concept paper, then we review that concept paper. If they dotted their I's, crossed their T's, they come to a review committee that it includes the governor's office, the School of Energy Resources, the Business Council, Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, all the energy folks in the state. And we provide a recommendation. Again, these funds are in the governor's office, so we provide a recommendation to him on a project that's in front of us. I would note we are in the middle, right in the middle, actually next week we'll be doing the review committee meeting on our next round of projects. Some of the projects that are in front of us, one of which is a pipeline to go to unlock some enhanced oil recovery methods in the Northeast as well. And just the high level estimates of that project would be in ad valorem, severance, and royalty payments to the state over the next 25 years would be about 1.4 billion. They're asking 16 million from us, so just want to kind of paint the picture of some of the projects that are in front of us and that we have done in some of those returns. So I know you all are looking at that. This has been debated in both chambers, but I just wanted to clarify that for the committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Is it Krieger? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Krieger. Any questions for Mr. Krieger? No, thank you for taking some time to actually walk us through a lot of this. It's very helpful. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Great. Others to speak on this topic? Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. Promised you with the last bill that I probably wasn't going to speak on it, but some questions came up from Representative Stivar that have stimulated me. The issue of domicile is important. You have, excuse me? Oh, okay.
No, you go ahead, please.
The issue of domicile is important. There's three things that sometimes get crossed together in Wyoming. One is home of record. That's solely the place where you entered active duty from. Residence, that's where your feet are on the dirt. And then domicile, which is your real, no kidding home state. Means a lot to states with an income tax, doesn't mean much to us here, but hence the issue. But what you need to keep in mind here is our National Guard folks and Army and Air Force folks could have a residence here and be sent to unaccompanied tours. And so they leave their family here in their home, and it could be a year, but that's their home and the family's in it and they're somewhere else on military orders. And that's what this is trying to address. I hope that speaks to your question, Representative Stivar. So subject to your questions, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Okay, so go ahead and fill up the chairs up here, guys, and let's just keep this moving pretty quick. Appreciate that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Revenue Committee. Pleasure to be with you again this morning. Nice to see you all. Pete Obermueller, the President of the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Mr. Chairman, a few things about this bill. I appreciate the Chairman of Minerals talking about it. He's a thoughtful, forward-thinking guy. And as he said to you, he's trying to find a win-win solution. Unfortunately, as this bill is written, it's nothing but lose for oil and gas. And it can be improved, Mr. Chairman, though not entirely fixed, but it can be improved by deleting Section 3, page 5, lines 15 through page 6, lines 2, the pay-fors, which is the clawback of the energy matching funds. So I'll talk about that in a second. The handout I gave you, again, just attempting to try to illustrate for you all, particularly as the Revenue Committee, which super important in my mind that the Revenue Committee have a clear understanding of how revenue comes into the state of Wyoming. And what that shows you, what the handout I showed you, it's both talks about the biggest three buckets of money that oil and gas provides to the state in severance tax, federal royalties, and property taxes, and then where all that goes, how that gets distributed to all the agencies, schools, local governments, cities and towns, counties, et cetera, there on that chart on the right. And I also want to direct your attention to the bottom left, which actually is a bar chart provided by my friends at the Taxpayers Association about mineral property tax in Wyoming. Again, this is 2023, though 2024 will look similar. You can see that the mineral property tax is by far and away the biggest, and then the second one way down there is total residential, and then the third bar is total commercial. I didn't put agriculture in there because it's barely perceptible to the human eye. So the conversation earlier about shifting burden, when we talk about shifting tax burden in Wyoming, there's only one way to shift it, and that's towards minerals. So I understand that the policy of this legislature is that we're going to do that. We're gonna shift the burden to oil and gas. Okay. We have backed off on a lot of those because at least after passage of Amendment A, most of them are constitutional. And, you know, this bill and the bill before this are constitutional as a policy to do that. That's fine. But I want you to do it with eyes wide open. So the trouble with this bill, and what gives me heartburn about this bill, is that it's a double whammy. So not only does it shift the burden to oil and gas in terms of keeping Wyoming whole, and don't get me wrong, oil and gas will ride to your rescue on this. We will provide the funding necessary. I direct your attention to the light blue bar on the right. That's severance tax money that comes in and goes to your general fund. 1 year, $627 million in severance tax that goes directly to your general fund. So oil and gas money is going to pay for this tax relief regardless. But then the pay for in this bill claws back an investment in projects that my members leverage to help us advance what we do, to provide more revenue to the state, to provide more jobs, and to ride to your rescue. Let me give you one example. Several examples, but let me give you just a couple quick ones. One of the projects went to the refinery in Sinclair, and it went to modernize their facility there, in part as a reaction to, you all remember, the gas prices at the pump a few years ago, and how painful that was to Wyoming citizens. Well, part of the reason was because we had refinery capacity issues and storage issues in Wyoming regionally. So one of these projects that, of course, private industry, as you heard from Director Krieger, leveraged is to modernize that facility, reduce their downtime by a significant amount. I can't remember the percentage, but I think it's upwards of 80%. And then they committed to purchasing Wyoming crude to fill that new capacity so that we can move more product. That's one of the Energy Matching Fund projects. Another one went to a pipeline company, or a startup company in Casper, who developed AI technology that can predict pipeline leaks before they happen, so that we can maintain not only just maintain our product, but also not have the kind of issues that none of us want with respect to pipeline leaks, particularly for landowners and agriculture owners who certainly don't want those leaks. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about here. So I understand that there's some heartburn with some of the projects, but I think we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, that we can advance these fossil fuel and oil and gas projects through the large energy matching programs, energy matching fund, and we will pay for it through our severance taxes. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't, if you remove Section 3, that at least sort of, removes the sting. So that you're providing me with some Tums about this bill, but I'm not going to love the bill regardless. But at least in that case, we're not taking investments in what we're trying to do in order to also ask us to pay more in taxes at the end of the day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take questions.
Questions for Mr. Obermueller? Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Obermueller, for being here today. I'm going to be thinking of you often now as on a horse with shining armor as a result of your testimony, and I do appreciate that very much so, and your comments here today, and appreciate what the industry has done for the state of Wyoming, even when sometimes I've disagreed over issues related to natural resource impacts. I asked this question not to say that the oil and gas industry isn't important to the state, but it has been more volatile, especially compared to property tax as a source of revenue for schools and local communities. And I guess maybe just help us understand what that volatility has looked like in the past and what we might be looking at in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Storer, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that question. Yeah, I wish it weren't so, but oil and gas, of course, you all know this. It's we operate in a global market, and Wyoming is a part of it. You know, we're a player in the global market, but we don't control it. So there are lots of things, actions of the president, actions of the former president, actions in the Middle East, any of these sorts of things can influence the price, and we don't have any control over it. Some members of the legislature have asked me, well, how come we can't just kind of get together and kind of set a price that works for everybody? And the answer is because we'd be in jail if we did that. You know, OPEC can do that, but we don't get to do that. So the downside for Wyoming, of course, is that volatility is real, and you know, you're experiencing an upside right now, and we're happy for that, and we're doing pretty well. But recall, you were here, Representative Storer, in 2020 when we laid down every rig in Wyoming. It's the first time we've laid down rigs since before we were a state. It's the first time we've had 0 rigs. That lasted about a year, and the cuts that your predecessors had to do as a result of that year were pretty drastic. And we came back, thankfully, and we're back. So that's all good. That's all good. But what if that would have lasted for 2 years or 3 years? The point is our tax code is unbelievably imbalanced, and we're happy to provide it. You know, there's some bills moving through HB 311 that you passed, really helpful out of this committee, and you know, some along the margins. But essentially, we Wyoming, as your LSO fiscal staffer Don Richards said in JAC, Wyoming lives and dies by oil and gas in terms of its revenue, lives and dies. So I wish it weren't so, but it is.
Any other questions? Quick question. Listen to Mr. Krieger, it sounds like his rough estimate, and it might not have been rough, it might have been more accurate, but he said 75% are fossil fuel projects. You agree? You guys have access to these projects. That's why this is so important. You guys have plenty of access to these projects, and these help our core industries, because we're certainly not looking to harm that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do agree, and it reminds me of one thing, because you know, part of the question is, well, why is there still 100 million hanging out? It's been appropriated, and you know, what are we doing just sitting on that? There's lots of reasons for that, because these projects are complicated, and you know, Director Krieger and I have kind of gone rounds on this, but I think ultimately he's looking out for that money, because one of the things about the matching funds is the Energy Authority does not allow us or my members to get a grant and then use that to go out and seek private leverage. We have to get the private funding first and demonstrate that the private industry is in it. And then they'll consider whether or not they're going to provide the grant. I think that's an important distinction. That's not how a lot of grants work. You get the grant first, then you go and say, see, the government's backed us, so we're going to do this. It's the other way around on these funds. So that's partly why it takes a while. But yeah, we have access. We certainly do.
Great. That's helpful. Thank you. All right. Other questions for Mr. Obermuir? All right. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this? Bill? Oh, that's right. We do have somebody online. 3 online? All right.
We do. We have Dixie Huxtable and Kelly Carpenter who
Okay.
would like to testify.
All right.
I'm admitting Dixie.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
All right, Dixie, please proceed. Or Ms. Huxtable, sorry.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman Locke and members of the committee. Dixie Huxtable, Commerce County Assessor. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points that have already been made. First and foremost is the administrative of this application process, and the ability to do it for 2025 is just not there, as they estimated 275,000 applicants to be uniformly submitted to us, and make sure everybody that should know knows about that application. Is just something that we don't feel we can do by 2025. Now delay that to 2026, and some of the suggestions that were made as far as us putting an affidavit in the bill for 2025 or doing a stand-up online application, absolutely. We can do that, and we would be happy to work on that for 2026. But for 2025, we just don't think as the bill is written with an application process, that could be done. There was a question about mobile homes, and I wanted to clarify that because this bill does not talk about residential real property. It just defines primary residence. The mobile homes would apply and they would be handled just the same as the residential property. So for us, that mobile home is not an issue. We would value them and treat them just like a site-built structural home. And the last thing to touch on is Representative Nicholas's bill about the order of these exemptions. Our understanding is that bill does describe the order and how the math would work. But what it does not do, the other bills have all included that language, I think, as you, Chairman Locke, had referred to, that if you take one, you don't get the other one. That language is not in this bill. And while we know, and the department has testified, that we cannot do them both in the current system, this bill does not identify that. And I don't know that the taxpayer would know that. So they may think they would still be eligible for both. So if that language could be added to this bill as an amendment, should it move forward, would be helpful so that everybody has clear transparency of how we administer it. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Great. Any questions for Ms. Huxtable? Thank you, Ms. Huxtable. Appreciate that. All right. Hang on a second. Let me get. And who is next? Kelly Carpenter?
Kelly Carpenter
Oh,
is on.
excellent.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you. Ms. Carpenter, please proceed.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, thanks again for the opportunity to join virtually. We support the intent of this bill as it is more targeted support for those truly needing relief. No question on the need for relief, and our organization maintains support for these targeted measures to do it as it provides relief for those truly in need, while minimizing the impact to our communities. And the committee is probably curious as to the opposition to the previous bill and the support for this bill. So I just wanted to offer some clarity into our organization's thinking. The opposition to the previous bill and in relation to other comments made really lies in the conceptual and potential future unintended consequences, because it's been noted that ag landscape has changed in recent decades, and there are many wealthy absentee landowners that have acquired large swaths of land. So it's very reasonable to assume that agricultural land may very well be the next place to look to raise taxes sometime in the future, leaving a larger burden for those legacy ag operations that remain. And it has been mentioned that our tax contributions are very low. Well, certainly that's a logical place to look to increase potentially in the future. So just wanted to add some clarification, support for the intent of this targeted solution for those in need, while maintaining our policy position on splitting out residential. Thank you, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Carpenter? Great. And then we have one more online. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, the
that it?
third person didn't ever join the Zoom.
Didn't join. Very good. Anybody else in the room? All right, then we will close public comment and we will work the bill, or we will, committee, what's your pleasure? I won't say that.
Second.
Okay, it is moved by Vice Chair Stivar and seconded by Representative Worf. Okay, so let's start off. Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's just delete section 3, page 5, line 15 to page 6, line 13.
So hang on, section 3. Okay, we're on page 5.
Page 5.
Okay.
And just delete the whole section 3, which is 1523 on page 5 and page 6, 1 to line 14.
All right, it has been moved to delete section 3, starting on line 15, page 5, ending line 13, page 6, seconded by Representative Campbell. Sorry, I think last night is still taking its toll on me just a little bit. Okay, all right, any discussion on this amendment? Does everybody have, is the amendment clear? Let me be sure I'm clear on that with everyone. Page line, or page 5, line 15, correct?
Page 6.
Through
to
page
13.
6, line 13. Okay,
Yeah, the reason I bring that, with the, what was said in testimony that, and by the bringer of the bill, I think this will help the bill out to better just by getting rid of that burden.
okay. Other discussion on the bill? Or on the amendment, sorry, on this amendment? Okay, you seconded? Did I not get a second, or?
Campbell.
Oh, Representative Campbell seconded it, so we're okay. So we're just discussing it now, so. Any comments on it?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chairman,
Representative Wharf.
I like leaving it in myself just because I think it at least answers one question, that is how we're going to take care of some of the impacts. And I know it wasn't lost on me. There's some concern over it, but I don't know that I'm ready to pull it out just yet. I mean, I guess I'd like to hear the rest of the body, what they think, but you know, I know the bringer of the bill did say there was an option that we could fund that out of the general fund, if I'm correct. So, I mean, it may be a moot point, but I just, I think it's taking away one of our arrows in the quiver as the presenter brought that to us.
Representative Stivar.
I think we need to leave the fund for these projects alone, so they can continue to put these projects in there. Leave that 100 million alone. I mean, I worked out in the one project that Mr. Obermuller brought up, I was actually part of. I didn't know that's where it started at. But that project really helped the Sinclair refinery out. So that's why I think that needs to stay and be left alone.
Other discussion on this amendment? Representative Campbell.
Yeah, I have to agree with Representatives Stiver there. You know, this is just, I don't want to do anything. That is Wyoming's tax base. I really don't want to take a chance of messing with that.
Okay. Any other? Representative Wharf.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask Mr. Obermuller to come up and answer a question for me.
Mr. Obermuller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Obermuller, the question I had is how many of your projects are dependent on these for grants? I mean, is that 90%, 30%? I mean, how many of your projects are dependent on these monies? And keep in mind, this is a 2-year proposal. So I think you probably kind of have an idea of what you see the next 2 years. Do you have a lot of projects lined up that would be in need of tapping into these resources?
Mr. Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Wharf, for that question. First, let me just clarify that it comes out of the general fund either way, and the general fund is largely funded by severance taxes. So we're paying for it one way or the other, with or without taking out Section 3. We're paying for it. If you leave Section 3 in, we're just paying for it twice. Mr. Chairman, to answer your question, you know, oil and gas, of course, is huge in Wyoming. All sorts of projects all over the state every single day. So as a percentage of total projects, it's tiny. But as a percentage of sort of forward-thinking projects that attract this investment to do some of the important things like the refinery project, and there's lots of others, and we can get you the full list and kind of talk about each one of them individually if you'd like. Happy to do that. You know, those are important. I know there's some in the in the 60 million or so Director Krieger talked about that they're going to review here next week or tomorrow, whenever he said. And there's more kind of in the pipeline, as it were. There's some who have applied that didn't quite have the application right, but are really important oil and gas, and they're going back to the drawing board and trying again, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, there's quite a lot of demand. Demand will outstrip the money for sure. But either way, it's paid for from severance taxes that we pay anyway.
Representative Worf.
Mr. Chairman, and I guess the reason I ask is because it's a 2-year program, and I didn't know if those projects, to me, if they're just coming into the system, I wondered if they're even gonna be able to use this money in the next 2 years. Or if, because I know most of these projects are like long-term, you're talking 10, 15, 20, 30 years to implement them. I just wondered how quick that money is, because we are talking about a 2-year program. And if those dollars would be available for that 2-year period while they're lining up. I just don't know. I would think you already have people in the system that would be using the money that's currently available. That's my question, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Obermuller.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thanks for your indulgence. I think, Mr. Chairman and Representative Wolf, what I've really liked about the direction that Director Krieger has led the authority is toward more immediate, actionable projects. The Energy Authority is still relatively new, as you know. It's a combination of 2 other authorities that were combined, and I really supported that because I think, like Utah has its own Department of Energy, essentially. We don't have it, and Energy Authority is the way to do it. And they're feeling their way out for a little bit. And this is just my opinion, but in a couple of early projects, they may have chased some shiny objects that are a little more long-term. But Director Krieger's turned that ship, and I really appreciate how he's done that. So no, a lot of these projects are near-term, actionable projects that the investment will take time and the return will take some time, but we're doing them right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Obermuller. Okay, so we're on this amendment. If there's no other discussion.
Question.
All right, let's, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so that's an amendment, section 3 been removed. Any other amendments? Representative Storer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose an amendment on page 2, line 6, after the word paragraph, with a period, to insert a new sentence. This is what we were just talking about with Mr. Gill regarding, and Ms. Huxtable, regarding that you don't get to do both exemptions at the same time. So this is the language, it's actually in House Bill 169 that we passed out.
Okay.
So it's just no person shall receive an exemption under this paragraph if the person receives an exemption under WS 39-11-105A 45, which is XLV. I had to think about that.
I did too, and I looked at it before, so I thought.
For the same year, Donna, I can get that language to you, period. So that's how it reads in HB 69.
So Representative Storer, did we just want to take that text? Is it accurate to take it straight from 169 and put it in here? Is that?
It's just, it would read, Mr.
Right.
Chairman, it would read exactly the same as the paragraph reads in House Bill 169 by inserting that sentence. Otherwise, the paragraph is the same.
Perfect, thank you. Second. All right, so moved by Representative Storer, seconded by Vice Chair Stivar. So I think you guys probably know this amendment. We've been over this one before. Are we okay? Any questions or discussion on it? There's no discussion. All in favor of this amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Great, okay, so that one was kind of a key one. Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And based on the ability of the assessors to implement this, we do need time for the application process. And as such, I think we could essentially take the language that was in, I think this is the right way to do it. In 328, we would create now, since we got rid of section 3, section 4, current section 4 would now become section 3. So then we would insert on page 7, line 7, the language section 4, create a new section with the language that would say, this act shall first apply to the tax year beginning January 1, 2026. Everybody follow that? Maybe look for a, is that the right way to do this, Mr. Gill?
Does any discussion on that amendment? A second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Go ahead, Representative Brown. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our constituents, when we were out on the campaign trail, they wanted tax relief now. And I think this is a good bill that we could implement fairly quickly and satisfy the voters of the state and the property tax, or the property owners. So I'm against this amendment.
Representative Ward.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm going to resist this as well. I think where there's a will, there's a way, and I think this can be done. I think it was mentioned that they can do they have the ability to do some of this stuff online. I think a document could be generated relatively quick that could allow that to happen. So I guess I'm going to resist this amendment.
Representative Kimball.
I'm going to speak for thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak for this amendment because, I mean, we have to be realistic in what the counties can implement. I don't see any merit to passing something that cannot be implemented.
Can I offer a potential friendly amendment to your amendment? Would that be acceptable? I would propose maybe that we don't actually change the implementation date, but instead we make it to where it's allowed to be more broadly implemented in year 1, and then in year 2, we actually apply the owner occupied. If that's not friendly, then we'll leave that discussion.
Mr. Chair, that might be an amendment to consider on the floor of the House.
Okay, fair enough.
If you wanted to apply to all real residential property, I think that is something that could be implemented this year, but because it does speak to primary residences with greater than 8 months, that's what requires the application process, and there just isn't time to do it this year. And we could ask Director Henson to explain that if we need.
No worries. In this case, then let's just, let's vote on if we're done with discussion on this amendment, let's vote on the amendment. Sorry, Representative Storr.
One other way perhaps might be to amend my amendment to say, should it be impossible to apply this to tax year beginning January 1, 2025, it be implemented beginning in January 2026? Just an idea.
I'll second.
Okay.
I was second, so I have to agree, so I'll agree.
Any other discussion on it? So you're just changing, you just changed the wording to if. So the amendment is if it's unable to be implemented in 2025, it'll be implemented in 2026. That's the amendment?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I think it actually needs to read the opposite. So this act shall first apply to the tax year beginning January 1st, 2026, should it not be able to apply to the year beginning January 1st, 2025. But that's the idea.
Okay, and you still second that? Okay, seconded by Representative, or Vice Chair Stivar. All right, let's go ahead and vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. No. Noes have it. I didn't hear it very well. Actually, just real quick, all the ayes, raise your hands. Okay, noes? Okay, wanted to make sure. Yeah, you were right. Okay, very good. I would propose, and I don't think we can really have the language here, but I would propose that we do have an amendment drafted up maybe by LSO if that's acceptable. I wanted to at least throw that out, where we set it up to where it could be implemented in 2025 with the owner occupant or primary resident component taking over in 2026. So I don't know that I have the language for that, Donna. That's, I think what we would like to do is maybe have LSO draft that up. I'm proposing that amendment. We'd like maybe LSO to draft that for us so we could make it to where it could be more easily implemented initially, and then the primary resident component. So that's an amendment I'm proposing. Seconded by Representative Wharf. Discussion on that amendment. Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support that. We've talked a lot of property tax issues over this first half of the session, and a whole lot of it is happening immediately, and I feel like this is the place and time to get that kind of language in, because there's 9 of us and 62 on the floor.
Okay, so let's, any other discussion on this amendment concept? Okay, that, none being seen. All in favor of this amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, all right, now, I don't think we have the language for this right now, so Director and Department, we may need some help there, but we'll run it through LSO and we'll try to make sure we get that worded to where it meets the requirements so we don't make this too difficult for you and everyone to implement, so. Okay, and, all right, any other amendments to this bill this time? All right, so the bill has been moved and worked. We've got basically 2 amendments implemented. Donna, are you clear on the amendments then? Very good. Okay, no other discussion being seen. Please take the roll.
This is a roll call vote on House Bill 130 as amended, homeowner tax exemption amendments. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative Lean left, an absentee vote of aye. Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Riggins excused. Representative Storer.
No.
Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Representative Wharf.
Aye.
Chairman Locke.
Aye.
We have 7 aye, 1 no, and 1 excused, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right, House Bill 130 has passed the Revenue Committee, and unless there's any other business, first, let me just thank everybody for coming. Thank you for your input. I really do appreciate all that you guys have done to help us out with this. I appreciate the bringer of the bill. another option out here that actually has some backfill I kind of like. So thank you, everybody, for all that you've done here today, and I really appreciate it. Everyone have a blessed day, and meeting is adjourned. Hey, Liz, I know you've got